Shoo-doo-bop. Sunday bites and tidbits. This life they'll help you live it and get yourself together. Sunday bites and tidbits.
Hello, everybody. We back.
Hello.
Hello. Vibrato.
Together, get it together.
She's toughing and puffing. Blowing your house down. Anyway, welcome to Sunday Bites and what, Babette?
Sunday bites and tidbits.
Oh, look at that's pretty.
Well, that was better.
Well, it was simple. You know, but the point is, it's how you feel today.
That was cute. That one was cute.
Cute.
Well, I kind of like the way the girl sings the song, and I'm just really going after a mimic. I'm trying to mimic her when she goes, Sunday bites and tidbits. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's what that one's about.
Well, you know what? We are she does such a wonderful and cute job with the song. But anyway, with the song.
What the song?
Anyway, we have Dr. Sachi with us, Sachi. And I met Dr. Sachi at the vegan sushi place.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
With her
Our
family.
favorite place.
Said, you know what? Her resume is crazy, and it's on another level of my consciousness that, you know, when you start talking her language. So we're just going to bring her in and allow her to share what it is that she does so that I don't have to try to say some of these technical words, but because he's going to be messing it up. But anyway, let's welcome Dr. Sachi. Welcome, Dr. Sachi. Is it Sachi? Right?
Say
Sachi.
it, Doc. Say it.
Yeah, it's Sachi.
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 Yeah.
Welcome.
It's wonderful to see you.
I know. I was telling them how we met in our favorite vegan. Have you been back to Makim Sushi?
I don't think I can top that visit, so I have not been back.
How do you not? I go back so often that I get sick that I go back so
You know, I live in Olympia outside of Seattle.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. But really, I mean, that topped the visit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Well, these are my co-hosts. I'm Terrah, obviously, you know, and that's Chef
I'm Babette.
Silvia.
I'm
And,
Silvia. Nice to meet you.
This is going to be a fun conversation because you're coming from a whole nother perspective. And but you're also a vegan.
I am.
That's nice. We all are. But you know, we want to cover a little bit of everything about who you are. We only have about 40 minutes. Before we wrap it up. So we want to get in as much as we can. So give us a little bit of your background. I was going to let you do it because when, you know, I don't want to mess up. Creative person.
Oh, I feel like our backgrounds are our stories, right?
Yes, they are.
So Sachi Horback. I was born and raised in Oahu in LA. I have lived in 6 different states, mostly on the coast. So it'll probably tell you something about me. I'm definitely a West Coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to school on the East Coast and could not wait to come back. I feel like West Coast is where I find community, my home. I always can't wait to come back and just take a deep breath. I have been married for almost 22 years. My husband, Evan, and I met in Philadelphia at a Wawa. Do you know what a Wawa is?
What is a Wawa?
A Wawa is like a 7-Eleven.
A Wawa the store. W-A-W-A.
It's like a deli, and for anybody who ever goes to visit on the East Coast, they know these Wawas, right? You can get coffee.
Do they have them in Florida?
I don't know. I feel like it's like a Philadelphia, Jersey, like they go like you eat hoagies.
Because I see them when I go to my sister's Wawa.
So it was by chance. He was a student in upstate New York. And I was also a student. I was in a doctoral program, and we were both headed to a Hindu festival across the street. And it's one of those where it's a 2-day kind of blowout, which they usually are, where the first night was, went until like 1, 2 in the morning. And then the next morning starts really early. And I had stopped off at the Wawa to get a cup of coffee, and he was getting a cup of tea. And I don't even know what you said. I don't even know like how we had that conversation, because who knew like that would be like a
Wow.
life-changing moment, right? So I have no idea. He like insists I must have, I'm sure I started the conversation. But within a minute, so you can kind of picture the Hindu temples right across the street. Like literally I had pulled in and then pulled out. And I said to this man that I had just met, "Oh, can I give you a ride?" So he got in my car and we pulled out, and then we pulled into our parking spot. 4.5 months later, we were engaged. And about 9 months later, we eloped. And then we had a large wedding the very next year. And I would say, like, we've been just like discovering our path ever since then. We have 2 kids, 2 daughters, 14 and a half and 16. We now live in the Pacific Northwest. I was born and raised vegetarian. He had been veg from the time he was 16. And about 12 years ago, we decided we were going vegan as a family. So anyway, that's like the personal mixed in, but I would say our family unit is really, really tight. And we have lived in a lot of different places and met a lot of great folks and created family and community wherever we are. And so that is a core strength of ours. No matter where we are and whatever state we are in, we are together and we find our people and we make connections where we can. Like Terrah, come on. I saw you from across the room and I was like, all right, like I kind of feel like
that is so cool.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So now,
What a fun story.
I know. I mean, still, and you like each other still. That's
that was you. Hey, Terrah, you know I was on that part. You still seem like y'all still seem brand new.
Like relationships take work, but when you know that's your person, like he's my person. And so we are dedicated to put that time and energy and whatever it takes. And I mean, there's days that are exhausting for both of us. Don't get me wrong, right? But we're dedicated to working it through. And so if it takes all night to have that conversation or get on the same page or whatever that is, then we're going to put in the time to do that, because we know that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. And so anyway, yeah, that's
but that is also, and I'm not saying that has anything to do with veganism, but we're talking with another guest and we were talking about, when you go on the path of becoming one with yourself and healing and healthiness, it becomes a journey with everything. It's not just here, it's up here, it's here, it's, and the importance of becoming whole and one with your partner and the people in your life. Like these women here and most of the women in my life, even if they're not vegans, I have aligned with consciously beautiful people. And it's more important to not be right than to grow and be better, and a lot of people, that's a lot of work for a lot of people, and they just rather be right and say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it here. Like, what it's like when you're with people who are they're your family.
Yes.
Right. I can see that. I can see that with how you all are, right? Like when you grow that kind of love and you grow that trust and you have that deeper connection. And I do feel like for us, veganism was right in line with who we wanted to be. I mean, we strive to be really conscious in everything that we do. And that, of course, that includes like the food we put in our mouth, right? Like how is this serving our body and our health and our mind and our interactions? And it just felt right. And when I said I was born and raised vegetarian, I mean, I had never had meat, fish, or eggs. But
Never had
I've
meat, fish, or eggs.
never had meat, fish, or eggs.
Wow.
Um,
Entire life.
my entire life.
Wow.
But I was raised with dairy. I mean, you know, my faith was, you know, worshiping cows, and it was sacred, and still is. And I found my truth in being able to really hold cows sacred by not participating in the dairy industry. And so when I went to a farm, and I remember my kids were really young, and you know, we took them to see this like really idyllic setting in Vermont, like all the things you hear about, right? This gorgeous dairy farm. And I mean, the kids, I just remember them running. They were so little, like 2 and 3, and excited to see the calves. And when I saw these cows that were set up, and their udders were so heavy and thick, and it just like, it broke my heart. And at that point was like, this is not in line with what works for us. And so that was it. And I remember then by the time we decided to move to the Pacific Northwest, so Portland is a vegan capital, right? Basically. And I remember taking my kids into a bookstore. And at that point, maybe my younger daughter was 3 and my older one was 4. And we sat them down, we read books. And it was like, okay, this is why we're choosing not to have milk anymore from cows. Because for us, it was important. Like our kids had to understand the why. So it wasn't just, no, you won't, but it was, you know, as a family, here's why we make those decisions. And then here's how we understand that not everybody will make the same decision. And I also work to make sure, and Chef Babette, I've seen you, right? I know you do this. It's like you work to make sure that you provide even better food options than anybody typically would have. So then I became like the best, you know, mama baker I could be,
There you
because I
go.
wanted my kids not to miss anything. And they didn't. Like their cupcakes were better, they're healthier, more delicious. Their dark chocolate actually had color to it, right? Like,
That part.
and then they were never lacking.
Yeah.
And they never looked back because they had their why solidly in their heart. So they knew, and they were making their choices, and they weren't doing it just for us. And they recognized that that food benefited them, it benefited the animals, it benefited the environment, it
You
supported
just blessed those girls with the knowledge. You taught them from the beginning. How wonderful is that? It makes me want to cry. You know, you gave them so much. You gave them a lot, and your parents gave you a lot. You never ingested that the flesh of, you know, and you know, sometimes, you know, people, they get it so confused or so twisted as to why you're considering making that particular, that part of your journey, and you're bringing everybody on board with you. People don't really get it, but to sit them down and share with them the way that you did is like, that's
Back to the oneness and the unit that you talk about, that you guys operate as
yeah.
and you flow together, and you teach together, and you learn together, and you grow together. And it's really important that, you know, I mean, I want to jump over a little bit to your work, your life, you know, work, you know, becoming a doctor, and what you do. Let's share a little bit of that, because we had talked about you coming on the show and what would be a good angle. And you shared with me, and I'm trying to remember exactly, but why don't you share with us what it is that
So I don't have a traditional work background for where I am. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. When I was in the midst of my doctoral program pretty early on, I knew I wanted to teach. And I knew that I wanted to teach in community colleges. For me, that was where the impact, the influence, the ability to serve our communities. And so that's where my heart was. And I had started teaching adjunct my first semester, and I was in a full-time in a doctoral program. And at the time, the dean had said to me, we've got a tenure track position coming up. And I didn't know what tenure was. I was like, okay, all right, that sounds great. I don't know what that means. And so he's like, look, I really think you should apply for this. And I said, well, how am I going to do that and still give 110% of my program? Because I have to, I know I always have to give 110%. And that's a lot of percent, right? 110% with school, 110% with my, let's be for real. And so he said, well, we're willing to work with you on it because we can teach anyone how to teach, but we can't necessarily teach people how to connect.
Wow.
And so I was just out of my master's program, in my doctorate pretty early on, 25. I was younger than most of my students in the class. I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do both these things. And so that was sort of the start of my teaching journey, while also getting my doctorate in clinical psych. And I tend to be someone that wants a lot of options. And I kind of have a feeling you're going to understand what I mean by that. It's kind of like some people choose one road. I feel like I need my toolbox, and I need to know, okay, how am I going to pivot at any point? What if I want to do this? And what if I want to do that? And I want to have my options. And so an example of that, in my doctoral program, you could choose psychological assessment, or you could choose family therapy as kind of your niche route. And I chose both, which meant that I did an internship for both. But I felt like if I'm really going to not only have choices, but also support the health and well-being of folks, for me, it made sense if I understood how to utilize all the tools of my toolbox. So I can understand how to use formalized assessments and IQ tests and educational assessments, understanding their limitations, and also understand family dynamics, and also understand what solid couples therapy looks like. And so I felt like, why only take one perspective? Again, I need all the tools in the toolbox. So at that point, by the end of my doctoral program, I was now, I've been married for a few years. I was pregnant with my first daughter when I graduated. And I was still always taking on large initiatives. Again, I kind of have a feeling you're going to understand what I mean by that, right? Just because you're in a certain role doesn't mean you're also not going to see what else can I be doing to improve, to change the trajectory of whatever's happening here. And so in higher ed, what's ensuring equitable access to high quality education and opportunity and family living wages. And so often that's not the way it looks. So that's what was then driving me, which again, now I was in this place where it was different than a typical faculty member who's has really great focus, but their focus is in the classroom. And I was like, no, but there's institutional change that needs to be happening. And we need to redesign, right? This is not okay. And it's been this way for ever. So this is already we're too slow. We're behind. So let's do this. And so next thing I know, it led me into getting into admin. And some would have said oh, but now you were tenured faculty. I was like, I'm not going to just stay tenured faculty because I got tenure. There's too much to do, right? We need to be doing impacts. I have full respect for those that teach in the classroom, and that's their place of impact. And I wanted to make larger institutional impact. And so that started our trajectory of moving around, because in higher ed, when you move up, you have to move out to move up.
Wow.
And as long as I felt like I was still able to bring representation to tables, I was still able to ensure that our voices were heard, I was still able to feel like I had impact, then I was willing to keep going up. So I was in the Washington Community and Technical College system. I was a district dean for business and social science.
Look at you.
Programs. I then moved into chief academic officer, vice president of instruction for multi-campus college, but all the time saying, how do we do this? How do we redesign our community college system? So I was active at the local, regional, national level of connecting to say, again, things have to change, right? We're not serving our students, especially those that are most vulnerable and marginalized and underrepresented and right, like enough. And so that was what got me up every day, even though the work was incredibly intense. And I thought at that point, so COVID happened and I thought I was going to be a college president. I was trained for that. I felt like I was ready for that. My first time out during COVID, I was a finalist in Southern California. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And I didn't get it. It's okay. It was like my first time out and I was getting a lot of encouragement, but COVID had a lot of its impacts. And one of them was for me to stop and say, is this still the place that speaks to me? And can I still represent in the way that is genuine and at my core? And I felt like the more I moved up, suddenly it was only political and I could no longer always be my authentic self, which was like, then why am I doing this? I don't need to be a college president for me. Like if I can't speak the truth, then why am I like, this is not going to work for me and I'm not going to keep moving my family. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, but I took a step back and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to maybe apply, maybe do group practice for just a hot minute. Like, those seconds where you're like, I'm just going to take a step back. And so I applied for a position at a telehealth startup, thinking I was applying for one thing. And they hired me as a director of behavioral health. And they said, we want you to kind of revamp everything that we're doing. And it was a great opportunity. And they had all this energy. And I was like, all right, what does that mean? And it was like, well, we want you to change our clinical recruiting and retention. Then I was like, okay, well, it's all about equity, right? And so if there are equitable opportunities here, then we're going to do this. So equitable opportunities to healthcare. Like I can do this. That's my passion, my core, whether it's education or healthcare, we're going to do the thing. And so I worked for them for about a year and a half and I was in 3 different positions and I had to learn a whole new language. And at that point I thought, well, maybe I'm not doing education anymore. Like, okay, now I have to learn industry language. And it was scary and it was completely different. And I felt like I knew another space and now I had to know this space and this communication and this language. And this is not what I expected. But I thought, well, I'm up for the challenge. We're going to try this thing. And then that actually led me into an interesting partnership with where I am now, which is a part of a large Fortune 5 enterprise. And what led me there was some work we were doing during COVID. And what I suggested was, hey, we're partners. Can I go with you to go look at these sites? I drove around with them for 3 days so that I can better understand the patient journey and what I was seeing. And so it was those genuine relationships and the mission to serve, which brought me to where I am. And then I was offered a position there, vice president of product. And honestly, I was like, I don't even know what product is. Can someone pull a job description? Because I'm not really sure. But what they said was, well, we need an integrator and we need someone to have different skill sets to support, how to sort of lead in a different way. And we need and I was like, okay, well, I have experience with partnerships. I have experience with empowering large teams. I have experience supporting organizations and really driving towards their goals. If that works for you, then I'm on board. And as long as I feel like I can still be a part of this mission to give back, then I'm in. Anyway, that's kind of where I am now. And so my role at the moment is I support strategic capability development. So we work a lot we're like the federal government facing arm. And so how to support large organizations like the VA and the Department of Defense and others, and supporting them with complex solutions to really challenging problems. And anyway, that's where I'm at now. And I don't know where I will be at then and later, but that's where I am now.
And you get a standing O. Geez, Liz.
First of all, second of all, and when I said I'm just gonna let her share this.
Thank you.
Because trying to read her bio,
You couldn't share that.
No, that and she does it like this. But empowering, man, you know, it's empowering who
I'm
you
just
are.
blown away.
I have so many questions.
I know you were sitting there
Go.
stuck, Sylvia. You were
Sylvia.
like,
My brain was just,
I know.
okay. So we're gonna, first of all, really?
No.
What? Okay.
This feels so unfair because what I really want to do is I want to hear about all of you. So I have to
we'll
tell you,
come
this
on
is
your
really
show.
hard for me because I'm
We'll
like,
come on-
this is like a monologue, and I know that's why I'm here. But I'm like, but I want to connect with all of you.
Well,
So know that, you know.
this is really important because we talk about people who are empowering and
Yes.
giving and uplifting, and also
Yes.
for those, and Sylvia, you go, but also for those who feel like, you know, how do I do anything I want to do?
Right.
You know, how do I make the next step? I just feel stuck. You know, then you hear someone like yourself and you go, you know what? Come on, let's get on and let's move it. You know,
Yeah.
that's what this show is about. It's not just about being a vegan. It's about, you know, that's part of it, but it's about the whole and how we're serving and doing for ourselves and growing. Sylvia, go, please, get your question.
Okay, so
Time.
many questions. I'm gonna work backwards. Okay.
Yeah.
My first question is probably pretty easy. You're still practicing Hindu?
Yes.
Okay. How has your practice informed, or does it inform, particularly when you were in the critical disciplines to do with psychology and all of that? How does your practice, or did your practice inform all of that? That's my first question.
That is such a good question. I would say, so at the heart of it, I held a strong belief that, well, I mean, for one, I'm going to say, this body is temporary, right? And however we all feel about that, right, across many faiths, I think that like that tends to be kind of a universal, as we recognize the temporariness of our current designation, and then the importance of every interaction. So in Hinduism, you know, we talk about karma,
Right.
and every action has a reaction. But again, I feel like across faiths, we can align on that, right? We know that there's implications, however you want to look at it. Like, you know, if you are being your true authentic self and you are treating someone in the way that you would want to be treated, and do you have kind of your core right in the way it needs to be? And if it isn't, there's going to be implications, whether you think it's going to happen now or next life, right? But it's going to happen at some point. It impacts like who you are in your soul. So I would say that knowing that really impacted my work all of the time. And I think then recognizing that what we can count on is change, that there's always going to be change. Again, whether you feel like that change is written or that change is still, you know, within your ability to kind of maneuver, you know, there's going to be change. So knowing, I think just those factors alone impacts my decisions. And so I guess I'm trying to, I know you were asking specifically about Hinduism, but I just, I want to make sure we're connecting it. Yeah.
You gave the answer. You gave the answer. I mean, your heart. And so from a clinical perspective, though, we often, I call myself a Bible believing metaphysical Christian. But
so she is. She's not lying.
Yes.
You reap what you sow. You know, do unto others as you would have them do it to you. We align in so many, we're so much more alike than we are different. All of us anyway. But to that end, as a person of medicine and a person of sort of a clinical space, often people want to perpetrate the lie that science and spirituality are in conflict.
Right.
So as you found your way through all of this. I've decided to call you a multilingual clinician because you know how to do so many things, and all of those things, you know, inform the other thing. So from a clinical perspective, how have you been able to align this sort of, again, I'm going to call it a lie because to me it is a lie, that science and spirituality are in conflict? They're not. How did you find that as you continue to advance in your journey?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they're both so necessary to our well-being. So my background, I came from a biopsychosocial perspective, right? What that meant was I recognized that there are so many different facets to what makes us kind of healthy beings. And so when we look at like the bio piece of it, you know, biology, we know that there could be, you know, something going on with your neurotransmitters. We know that there could be something kind of organic. We could, like, how we choose to address that, right? There's lots of different ways, Eastern, Western medicine, all of that. But it's important to recognize that sometimes there is that biological component. But I think going back to a pill doesn't solve everything. The psychosocial, right? The psychological is how we cope. What are kind of like our life skills? What do we do when we're stressed, right? Like how do we kind of address conflict and anxiety and all those kind of things? And so if I'm meeting someone, like that's an important aspect. If I'm working with someone, then it's like, okay, now I'm trying to understand, is there a biological component? Can't really rule that out yet, right? I don't go there first. I actually first go to psychologically, how have they learned how to cope with stress, relationships, traumas, all those things. Because they are so linked, right? Mind-body connection, absolutely so linked. What do they do at times where they're looking for strength? And so that's, again, the spiritual component also, right? That's an opportunity right there. You go to what brings you strength, what has you kind of like the ability to kind of go like in an inner kind of journey, and then allows you to then move forward. And then the social component absolutely has to be there. So someone might come to me and they might say, you know, I'm feeling depressed. Okay, well, let's think of like all the multitude of reasons why, right? I mean, by a bio perspective, right? We can understand neurotransmitters, serotonin, like there could be many, many things going on. Thyroid, right? Anything. Psychological. Okay. Now, are they depressed because maybe they're going through a spiritual turmoil? Perhaps, right? Maybe they felt like, here's where I'm doubting and wondering, like, what's the meaning of life? Is there meaning? Is there something that is driving me towards what I need to be doing? So like, again, you can look at this from all different perspectives. The social, if I find out, actually, they're just going through a divorce. They're right. Okay. So am I going to say that a pill is going to solve everything? Nope. But can I say that sometimes for some people that might actually be a part of it? Sure. But I feel like all of those things, the science and the spirituality, they're absolutely connected, and they're also part of our health and well-being. Like our brain and the way that our mind adapts, it's responding to things, right? And so we know that our brain impacts our thoughts and our behavior, but actually there's a lot of neuroscience that shows that when you adjust the way you were thinking, it actually starts to make neurological change. So I kind of piece all those things together. And actually I can share my favorite theorist from like years ago, if you're interested.
Yes, absolutely.
But, okay, so I think you're going to like him. So have you ever heard of Irwin Yalom?
Yep.
I have not.
Okay, so when I was in my master's program, I was in a class where my teacher was trying to bring to point that, and I think this goes to your question too. She was trying to say, you know, a lot of these, you know, theorists, or they have some kind of religious basis to them, but now here's Yalom and he doesn't, and he's right? Like he's agnostic. And when I heard his 4 basic fears, so let me see if I can pull them right now after a long day. But one being, what he says is that everybody, no matter who you are, where you come from, struggle with these 4 things, like 4 basic tenets. So one of them is death anxiety. At some point, you see it in children, you see it in adults, you see it kind of rear its head at different times. So fear of death, right? Another one is fear of meaninglessness, right? Think about that. Like at any time in your life, right? You may start to kind of, some people do this earlier. Some people, they wait till they have a midlife crisis, like, but it happens, like this fear of meaninglessness. Then there's a fear of freedom, right? Like a fear of making choices, right? So that's really interesting because a lot of people want a decision to be made for them. They actually don't like choices. They're like, please give me boundaries. Just tell me what you want me to do, right? And so that's a fear. And then there's this fear of isolation and being alone. And so that one's really like interesting too, right? And so I bring that up because when my teacher had said it was agnostic and it was this, and I said, to me, with all due respect, that's a pretty Western perspective, because from an Eastern perspective, all of this gels as part of my faith.
Yeah.
So I actually see that this is very much connected.
Yeah.
And I just think she was taking a Western perspective without recognizing it. Right. So I don't know. Did that answer your question? I just think it's.
No, it completely answered my question because it piggybacked onto this next. It's so funny because my husband sent me literally sent me a post today about the neurological connection to the spiritual manifestation of energy and the power of the mind. And so it was interesting that you said that. And I just did a post today about the fear of death.
Yeah.
But the perspective that, lots been going on last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Did you
see me glaze over? I was like, yeah.
Right? I think we all just said, not there, not going there. Let's keep going.
But you know what's really funny about this? Not funny, haha, but funny, very interesting, is to your point, the fear of death permeates everything. And I'm not talking about physically dying. I'm talking about death of stuff, death of a relationship, death of this, death of that. And everything we do, when we talk about fear, primarily we're talking about the fear of death. It makes us, well, if this thing happens, then everything is going to go crazy. Death. If this thing happens, then we're going to lose everything. Death. If I don't get that person, if that person doesn't align with me, it's that fear, and it speaks to all four of those manifestations you just outlined. So take all of that and compress it into the fishbowl, the petri dish of COVID.
Yeah. Yes.
Now we're at home and we're isolated and we're free, but we're not free, and all these things. It's all sort of piling on top. And with the spiritual component that you just spoke of, for me, the way that I believe is that God is in everything and moves in and through everything. So anything that manifests itself to do something good for us is coming from God anyway, coming from the mind of God anyway, from vitamin D to, Alka-Seltzer Plus and AI. I mean, it all comes from the heart and the mind of God. And what you just said is so, for me, very liberating for folks who are like, well, I'm never going to go and have this surgery that I know I need because, I'm just going to, and this person up here going, well, I'm going to just, all I'm going to do is trust doctors. There's a whole, it doesn't have to be either or. Talking about those boundaries, you can walk in unity, and you can be one with it all, and not label it good or bad, but stay neutral. Because if one thing is good, something else has to be bad. But
fear of choices. It's the fear of choices, and then the fear of consequences. If I make the wrong choice.
I'm so glad you're here.
Which has a lot of people frozen, because to make no choice, so that I'm not wrong in the end, or just fear of making a step, not necessarily even to be wrong or right, just because I'm moving away from what I know. I'm moving away from what's comfortable. And this is comfortable. I know I don't like it, but this is where I live, and I can stay here no matter what else is telling me this place doesn't work for me anymore, but this is what I know.
Right.
It's
right. If you made choices in that circumstance, then you'd have to live with the consequences, and people worry about that, right? But like, is that a life worth living to have someone else make your choices for you? And so even if the choice and the actions that we make, I mean, right now, I'm like, okay, what can I do locally? Right? What can I do locally? What can I do in my community? What can I would imagine that you were all also at that place where no one's going to keep you backed in a corner. And so, yeah, okay, there might be a lot of these oppressive forces, and you're still going to find a way to move out of that corner
Right.
and do what you need to be doing, right? So how do you take those next steps? Because you do have choices. To not do something is also a choice,
Mhm.
right? So how do we continue to move one step in front of the other and make choices? We can, right? We can make choices. We can move forward. We can work together, right? Like, we can do those things. And so I just think it's important to recognize, like, when those basic fears exist. And for me, again, that theory made complete sense. There's a lot of others that I think make sense on different levels, but it's, it's actually, the theory is existential humanistic therapy, right? And so that existential component, that always made sense to me. I was like, okay, I can do other kinds of techniques and all of these other things, but if at my core, those basic tenets make sense, then that frames out how I view things from a
It
psychological
informs
perspective.
everything else, every
Right.
other
Yeah.
aspect. And Babette says this all the time. You can call it good, bad, or indifferent, but it's
Yeah.
all a part of your journey. And if you
Yeah.
understand that whether you believe in reincarnation or you don't believe in reincarnation, what
Right.
you know is that this version of you gets one trip.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so, and that thing that you thought was so awful is a link in the chain of the journey. And you don't know where it's leading you until you identify it as the bad thing and you stop. But
Right.
that
And
all
it
it
leads you
always says
nowhere.
it's all about
Yeah.
the journey. It's the journey. And if we can kind of get that perspective, that
Yeah.
not temporal, looking at everything around me perspective, but look at it from that other space, it changes how you feel about it, which changes what you think about it and what you do about it. You know?
Well,
Yes.
I'd like to ask Dr. one question. At my age, 74 years old, a lot of times I am subjected to energy that I can either go with my ego
Mm-hmm.
or I can go with my control.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've been learning lately, and that you think, man, you just now getting this at 74. I've been learning that my power is not in my ego.
Mm-hmm.
My power is in my control.
Mm-hmm.
That is when I give myself the most love. I care for myself so much better than if I'm trying to feed an ego.
Yeah.
Because when I'm bouncing around with that negative energy, going back and forth with that, if you ask me 24 hours later what all of that was about, I can't tell you. I don't know. Because all I was doing at the moment was feeding an ego.
Mm-hmm.
Heart racing. I'm too old for that shit. I don't need none of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am learning right now at 74. It's not the ego.
Yeah.
It's your control.
Yeah. And again, you're making like conscious, deliberate choices.
Yes.
And even our egos, there's a part of our egos that are fairly false too, right?
Oh,
I am this, I am that, I am.
yes.
I'm like, let's pull all that back and see, like, at your core, like, who are you? Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's that kind of like authenticity to say, like, I'm so much more than, my job titles, or I'm so much more like that. That can't define me, because that will come and it will go. but who am I
Who
as
am
a
I?
person? And
Yes.
like, yeah, the choices that I choose to lean in on and face, and what that means for me. I think also there's
Oh,
a fear that a lot of people have of regret,
Mm-hmm.
right? People fear regret all the time. And I firmly believe that if you live a life of integrity, then your life you'll have mistakes, but you have made the best mistakes, the best decisions that you have had to make at that time, right?
Right.
So as long as you're living a life of integrity, I don't believe that at the end you're going to have a life of regret, because again, when you look back at it, you were doing your best to be mindful and care. And it doesn't mean like there weren't some pieces you didn't know at the time, but it was intentful. And like, that's the
my
best that
God,
we can do.
I love you.
Doc, Doc
Oh,
Sachi, it is time for you. It's 4:00, and I know
no.
that you have to go. So I wanted to make sure that you're aware of the time.
Oh,
But we're gonna have to have you back on again.
Please
oh,
come back.
Maybe do a live with you. I think a live would be great where people
Live
could
would
ask
be great.
questions, because this
oh, I would love it.
and this was wonderful. And there's so much, there's so much.
This
synergy.
was so good. Thank you, Terrah. Thank you, Doc.
Yes,
Man.
Yes. So we always end our show with a question. If you were a book,
Oh,
your life was a book, whether it's last month, last year, the whole entire life, what would be the title of your book?
this is a tough one. I know I keep saying authenticity, and later on I'm going to be like, that was a terrible answer. But like, I think there's something we're all talking about putting our egos to the side and having that authentic connection. And so I think I'm thinking it's something like, like authenticity unmasked, or it's something like, how do you get at your core? So authenticity it's like not unleashed, unmasked, but you get where I'm going. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's hard to make those true heart connections if you don't take off those layers of fear and doubt and shame and all of these sorts of things. And so my book would be somewhere in that, of just taking off those false layers, right? So whatever that would look like, maybe I'll have a better answer for you next time. But
No, that's
Press
perfect.
your false layers.
Authentic,
yes,
unfiltered.
I want to write it with all of you. I feel like that would make more sense. Like, let's do
You're
it
the second
together.
person to ask us to co-write their book.
Yes. Well, anyway, we want to say thank you for tuning in. And we always end, Sylvia. You want to start
first?
Yes, you always go first.
Always first.
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, you guys know what we're gonna say. You
Uh-huh.
can probably say it with us at this point. Nobody can do you better than you.
I'll go next.
Go ahead.
Nobody can do you better than you.
And nobody can do you better than you.
Nobody can do you better than you.
Thank
I love it. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be on here.
This was so different and so deep, and so many layers. And it really encompasses everything that we talk about on this show. Nothing goes without the other thing, and we need all those pieces to become one. We need all the pieces of us as humans, as sentient beings, to become, we are all one on this planet. You guys, thank you for tuning in. Dr. Sachi, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week on what, Babette?
Sunday Bites and Tidbits.
Bye-bye, everyone.
But it's all right.